welcome to Cover Story. Today we're in conversation with Baijayant Panda. He is, of course, the National Vice President of the BJP. He's also the state in charge of Delhi and Assam. And he's been writing some very pretty interesting columns and articles talking about how the liberal media is taking on India, the stance of this is something which the BJP always claims when it's being attacked. And when when they get kudos, then they don't have such a problem with the liberal media. Or so that is my point. I'm going to take that up with Jay Panda. But first of all, Jay, welcome to this conversation before you're already shaking your head and we haven't even begun.
Thank you. Thank you, Priya. It's good to be back on a conversation with you.
Good to have you for one of our conversations. But before I go on to the topic where I'm sure we're going to disagree, I want to first talk about Delhi because, that's a state that you're in charge of the capital. And that's something where we've been seeing a lot of face-off between the Aam Aadmi Party and the BJP. The Aam Aadmi Party has been attacking the Prime Minister directly. Kejriwal has been, alleging that there is a vendetta, that there is, what's it called? Two of the BJP Aam Aadmi Party leaders are also in jail. They're saying you're misusing the CBI. So what is happening between the Aam Aadmi Party and the BJP? Is it all political?
So, the Aam Aadmi Party had stopped abusing the Prime Minister for 5 or 6 years because they realized it was counterproductive. The Prime Minister is the most popular leader and it was just working badly for them. But recently, after the arrest of their former Deputy Chief Minister, they've again started abusing. Now, the reality is as follows. The fact that Manish Sisodia has not got bail from courts for now 3 months, and his colleague Satyendra Jain has not got bail from courts now nearly approaching a year. These kind of things only happen when there is very solid prima facie evidence. And I can tell you, as the BJP Prabhari for Delhi, long before the agencies started taking up the matter and arresting and interrogating them, the word on the street was very clear that the Aam Aadmi Party was involved in massive corruption. Now, the liquor scam, it takes the agencies a little longer to take action because they have to investigate, they have to get evidence, they have to get corroborative evidence so that it will hold up in court. But in politics on the streets, we get to hear all the time. The number of liquor vends almost tripled. Liquor vends being allowed in places like in front of schools and mandirs, temples. The wholesale liquor being changed from 2% to 12%. And the stories that were coming from those who are in the liquor business were very clear that they're involved in massive corruption. And that has now become corroborated with the evidence that's coming.
The timing of all that was very interesting. It happened right in the middle of that Gujarat election and the Delhi municipal elections, for the mayor.
No, if you think about it, it's not political for the simple reason that politically, ideally, it should have happened before the Punjab election, because the way the Aam Aadmi Party spent massive amounts of illicit cash in Punjab and the way they are flirting with the drugs trade, the way they are flirting with the separatists, with Khalistanis, it's a real national security threat. But the reason it didn't happen before the Punjab election is that the agencies cannot really take these actions unless they have evidence, and that investigation process takes time. So I think that contradicts the allegation some people are making.
The timing. But Kejriwal has been saying that, during his interrogation also we are told from sources that this was something that the LG had also signed off on. So, you're taking action against the Aam Aadmi Party and, are they to be blamed? Is it just one-sided blame?
Look, the LG is a constitutional post and the Lieutenant Governor does not take actions whimsically. These actions are taken with the files being sent for legal vetting, with all kinds of advice being received. And there has to be prima facie evidence. Now, look at recently, this thing has come out that 45 crores has been spent on the Delhi Chief Minister's residence renovation during COVID, when revenues were badly hampered, when government resources were desperately needed for the public. Now, this is not something the LG did. First, it was broken by exposés and by sting operations, and media covered it. And only after it became a big issue, the LG has asked for and is looking into it, and we are waiting to see what decision he takes. But the fact that the
But
Aam Aadmi
but you know
Party.
what Kejriwal has said to that? Now he's saying, I'm not renovating my own house. It's the chief minister's official residence. Sanjay Singh has also alleged that the prime minister's home is being renovated for something, I think, at 500 crore or something like of that sort figure. So,
Look,
can the
look,
BJP of
let me answer that. See, the reality is that Kejriwal allegedly stood for a different kind of politics. He's on record. You can go online and see his own videos where he says that he doesn't want a fancy house, where he says he doesn't want fancy security, fancy arrangements. Now, of course, he has gone back on all the promises and commitments he has made. But it's not just a question of whether a chief minister should have a fancy house or not. It's a question of how laws were broken. You cannot spend 45 crores without tenders, and that's what he has done. The Delhi metro project, the extension, was delayed by 2 years because the Delhi government would not give clearance for cutting certain number of trees. But in case of Kejriwal's bungalow, the clearance was given within 24 hours. These are the kind of hypocrisy. These are the kind of blatant sort of authoritarianism that is flying in the face of what they allegedly stood for.
now what about the prime minister's own house being renovated or
No,
tremendous
look,
amount?
I can assure you that whatever renovations are being done by the government of India, all rules are being followed. Certainly, no work is being done without tendering. Massive public works are being done. Nobody has been pointing out, there's not a single case or single allegation of any misappropriation. Now, if you are spending in the chief minister's bungalow 1 crore on curtains, 1 crore rupees on curtains, and there's no tender. If you're spending 40, they have blatantly violated the rules by breaking up the 45 crores into smaller amounts so that they would not have to tender. Now, this is a clear case of violating of the rules, and I'm pretty sure that he will end up being tripped up on this.
But if you take the larger political fight, Jay, because I don't have the Aam Aadmi Party rebuttals to each charge, but if you take the larger fight over here between Kejriwal and the Prime Minister, Arvind Kejriwal has ambitions. He may not have presence on ground, but in terms of chutzpah, in terms of, audacity, in terms of a lot of the things, I would say he is Modi 2.0. He, just the way he communicates, he's a good communicator. He is a leader who has national recall. He may not have a party down south or anywhere, but everybody knows Kejriwal. He works tirelessly. There's a lot of things they have in common. Both talk religion when they want to. One spouts the Hanuman Chalisa at will on TV. Both do welfare politics. Both are also very strong control leaders. So, if there is anybody from the opposition who can challenge him, I would say it would be Kejriwal, except for the fact he doesn't have a presence on the ground.
It is this great hope of many, including some in the media, who keep wishing that there would be somebody to take on the prime minister whose popularity is colossal. Now, till now, many of your colleagues are trying to once again relaunch Rahul Gandhi, who has failed, I don't know, 20 times, 30 times over the last 20 years. Now, finally, when it is becoming clear that that is not working, there are people who are clinging on to the hope that Kejriwal will turn out to be that messiah. But, there is no comparison between the two. Modi ji has struggled all his life and renunciated everything to come to this position. And the results are there to see. Around the world, during COVID, afterwards, in the financial help that India is giving to other countries, in the most massive vaccination campaign in history of humankind, all over the world, people are looking at Modi ji's leadership and India's renaissance, India's re-emergence as a major factor in handling global issues. Now, you cannot compare that with what is happening in Delhi. While on the one hand, the Kejriwal government keeps spending huge amounts of money on advertisements, and maybe that is why media people keep propping him up and keep giving him a pass. The reality is 74 schools.
So guess whose playbook is taking a load from?
Let me say. So, for example, this Delhi government has advertised its so-called achievement on schools. The reality is 74 schools have been shut down during his tenure. Not a single hospital has been added. Look at the state of infrastructure. I just gave you the example of delaying infrastructure projects like the metro extension. If you go and see the state of the so-called Mohalla clinics, They're a complete sham. No vaccinations were done there during the crisis that Delhi faced. You saw how the Kejriwal government mismanaged the hospital and the oxygen crisis in Delhi. Now, it's one thing to advertise, and it's one thing to get media on your side and to keep promoting you as the so-called alternative. But it's quite another thing to deliver services and to govern properly. Go see the quality of water that is being given to the people of Delhi. It's awful.
But you know what Kejriwal says, for instance, is promoting services at your doorstep. He's saying half the plans that he wants, the center does not let him implement. And his narrative of the Mohalla clinics and the schools, when we went to Gujarat as reporters, people were asking us, "Ye Delhi model kya hai?" Which is why Kejriwal scores over someone like Rahul, because he has a Delhi model to sell. Rahul has no model. I mean, at no point am I saying Kejriwal is a national alternative, because he's barely there in 2.5 states. But as a, in terms of headline grabbing, narrative setting, he is giving the PM a run for his money or the votes.
Not true. Now, I'm glad you are finally acknowledging that Rahul has no model. I am sure we will have a future conversation like this, where I am confident you will acknowledge that Kejriwal is no alternative and has no model. Remember, both his right hand and left hand are in jail and not getting bail because of serious crimes like money laundering, and the liquor scam is a very massive scam. And that's why he has stopped using the phrase Kattar Imandar Sarkar, because it flies in the face of what people of Delhi are seeing. Now, yes, he increased the advertising budget of Delhi something like between 500 to 1,000%, while the of Delhi did not increase that much. So yes, some people may be fooled for a short period of time, but I can assure you, the people of Delhi, the people of Gujarat, the people of Punjab, people in many other states are beginning to question, because I have gone to some of these states and heard on the street people ask, we can't believe that this man has spent 45 crores without tendering on his residential accommodation. So these things are coming out. There is, in fact, a repository of videos online, which I encourage your viewers to look at, where there are dozens of examples of Kejriwal flat out contradicting what he himself has committed earlier on. So this is a man, you can't sustain that kind of lying for the long term.
Okay, just moving on from Kejriwal to the larger picture of the opposition. Kejriwal doesn't have, neither all the opposition parties also going to support his bid if he even wants to become the face of the opposition. Who do you think will become? Nitish Kumar is trying, Sharad Pawar is playing his games, which only he knows what he's doing. So where is the opposition, and who do you think it would be? Because we do need an opposition, wishful thinking or not, we do need an opposition, to get to keep the government going.
I agree with you that a democracy needs a good opposition, a strong opposition, an honest opposition. But, asking that to a BJP office bearer is a little awkward, because certainly, we can be held accountable for many things, but that the opposition is not up to mark is not something that the BJP should have to answer for. But nevertheless, I'll give you some answer. The problem is all the opposition parties are dynastic parties. And even it is now being rumored that even Kejriwal's party is likely to become a dynastic party. That's the rumor going around Delhi. So when they're all dynastic parties, they don't work rationally from an external point of view. What you and I would look at a political situation in a state, and we would think this is rational or that is rational. A dynastic party doesn't look at it that way. So Congress destroyed itself because it did not allow any talent to rise. Otherwise, because they would perhaps outshine the Crown Prince. So exactly the same thing happens in every region. These parties don't allow talent to rise because they are dynastic parties. And so as a result, it is unlikely that they can have that cohesive glue that an ideological nationalist party like the BJP has. The BJP has this mantra that we use at every internal meeting, which is nation first, party second, and self last. No other party talks in those terms. So to expect that they will come together is not realistic. So the best that can happen is they can try to cobble together a completely disparate set of people. But I think the people of India have gone past that. And that's why, certainly at a national level, they are not at all getting rewarded.
Which was what makes you wonder, our elections, you're also a political analyst also, our elections just getting too presidential, and is that good? Because the issues get lost over there. We don't talk about the GDP economy. We just talk about, are you for Modi or against Modi? That becomes the narrative.
Look, if you have reduced everything to a for Modi or against Modi, that is the opposition's fault because they try to pick fault with everything. Now, Modi ji has brought about many reforms which some of these opposition parties had ardently advocated. But just because it was Modi ji who brought about the implementation of those laws, they have gone against it. The farm laws were one example. So the point is, if you make it, if you in the opposition make it that way, that you will go against your own manifesto, just because Modi ji champions a certain idea, that means you are completely obsessed with Modi ji. Modi ji himself is not obsessed with Modi ji. He's obsessed with a new India. He's obsessed with taking India to the next level. And we keep talking about the economy all the time. We keep talking about the Jam trilogy, which has saved hundreds of billions of dollars, which were being siphoned out of the system. We keep talking about the massive infrastructure growth that is happening. We keep talking about the startup economy, which is booming. These are things that the opposition doesn't talk about. So the reality is, I want to conclude this segment by saying this. I agree with you that the country needs a good, strong opposition, but the opposition has to be honest. It has to say things as they are. If the Modi government is doing something that's good for the nation, it doesn't harm the opposition to acknowledge that and yet oppose the government on other things that they don't like. So unless they, in the process of opposing the BJP and opposing Prime Minister Modi, many of these opposition parties have made official claims which go against the national interest. They question our army's actions. They question, so many things that are happening on the border. So unless they get out of that mindset, let them be pro-India and anti-Modi, and they would do better, I think.
So in other words, have a constructive issue-based opposition than just a personality-based
yeah, I mean, look, when the vast majority of the people are giving a positive response to the Modi government's governance, that means the Modi government's governance is obviously doing largely something good. So you can't attack those things which the public is liking. You can, as I said, be an honest opposition by acknowledging some of the good things that are happening in India, and you can still oppose on policy a few other things.
And give your own alternative narrative. Right?
That's crucial. That's crucial because none of them are providing any alternative vision. Everything they're talking about is how to oppose the Prime Minister on any whim of an idea.
That I agree with you, Jay, on that point. I'm going to take a break and come back and take a step back and take a look at the larger picture at India's place in the world. This is the year of G20. This is the year when all eyes are definitely going to be on India. And of course, something that you've been talking about a lot, how the Western media views India and why you have a problem with that. But after a quick break. Hello and welcome back to a cover story interview with Jay Panda. Jay, we've been talking about Delhi, a state that you're in charge of, but now I want to talk a bit about what you've been writing, some of your columns that you've been taking on the Western media a lot, and you feel there is this bias against India. A lot of people in the BJP feel that. My point is that's a very convenient stand you take. When it opposes you, you say there's a bias. When you get praised, then you're fine with it. Isn't there a contradiction in that?
No, there isn't, because you are oversimplifying it. So when there is a progress on some front, let us say India is the fastest growing large economy in the world. Now, this is being acknowledged by everybody around the world. This is being acknowledged by IMF, by World Bank, by the UN, by everybody. And yes, of course, we will celebrate it, but it is fact-based. It is based on the numbers that India's GDP is growing faster than any other country, faster than the US, faster than China. Now, let's take, for example, day before yesterday, something called the World Press Freedom Index came out with its latest listing, and they ranked India lower than, on press freedom, they ranked India lower than countries like Libya and Afghanistan. Now, just on the face of it, everybody knows that's ludicrous. These are war-torn countries where journalists get shot all the time. It's just not credible at all.
You have to be grateful we are not getting shot as yet. Yeah.
Let me explain. Similarly, I have in a recent column, and I would request your readers, your viewers to read it. I have taken out several such so-called rankings, and I have exposed they're entirely fabricated. You cannot, for example, another such index recently ranks India's food security position below nations like Sri Lanka, below nations like Pakistan. Now, Sri Lanka and Pakistan are countries that have had an economic collapse. They are having food riots. In Pakistan, dozens of people have got killed in food riots. And India has given food aid to some of these countries, like Sri Lanka. And on top of that, India is running the world's largest food aid program, which is the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana for something close to 900 million people. There are no reports of starvation in India. No media is reporting starvation in India, and yet there are these so-called pundits around the world who are ranking India's hunger index, food security index below such countries. So obviously there is a great deal of bias in those rankings, and it's very odd because I can understand when a Chinese media does it or a Pakistani media does it, but these liberal platforms around the world really should be celebrating many of the things India is achieving. Because let's take, for example, gender equity. Now, one of the biggest problems in India has been sex selection using new technologies like ultrasound scanning, which is illegal, but it used to happen a lot. Now, in just the last 5 or 6 years, there has been a dramatic turnaround. The gender ratio has gone to 1,020 girls or females for every 1,000 males. Now, this is a very dramatic turnaround after many, many decades. And this should be celebrated by liberals in India and throughout the world. But you barely see a mention of that. And you see these fabricated rankings. So I will conclude by saying, wherever there are genuine fact-based analysis of India, of course, we are willing to listen. We are willing to course correct. But we can't go along with these fictional fabricated rankings and somehow accept them as legitimate.
Okay, I take that point of yours. Moving on to the G20, Jay, what do you think? There is a lot of hope also that India, can mediate between Ukraine and Russia. There is a lot of expectations out of India. We're also doing a fine act between balancing the West and Russia. How do you see India? How can we use this G20 to our advantage?
I think that's one of the important issues that thinking Indians should dwell upon. There is a new India which has come into being, apart from the economic growth, apart from the fact that we are able to aid other countries with vaccines and with financial aid and other things. One of the major differences that has happened is in our foreign policy, you can see that we have taken an approach that we want a win-win relationship with other countries. So in the past, Indian interests were often sacrificed to the global the global applause that we sought. We sought validation.
Are you going all the way back to Panchil or somewhere closer?
Not just that. For example, after the terror attacks in Mumbai, the way we just wrung our hands and didn't take any action, the way we kept saying that we could do nothing for cross-border terrorism, and if we did something, dunya kya kahegi? What will the world say? We were stuck on that. So we have, for example, shown robust responses. We proved the theory wrong that any retaliation on the Western Front would lead to a nuclear situation. And by retaliating against terrorist camps, we have proved that theory false. And it's very clear that anybody that wants to bleed India will have to pay a very high cost for it. So this is one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is we are not there to be aggressive against other nations. We are there to help and mutually help each other. So in that context, G20 is a very important forum because it's only in the last 15 years or so that G20 has achieved this kind of paramountcy, if you will. Because before that, much smaller groups of developed countries, whether it was G7, used to decide on important issues where other countries had to lump it. They had no choice about it. And today, there are many other growing economies, especially the BRICS nations. And India is, of course, the largest or one of the largest and at the forefront of that. So when it comes to global issues, we are taken much more seriously today. You will see many instances of global leaders praising India's actions, praising India's caution in dealing with some of these issues. And when it comes to things like Ukraine versus Russia,
Yes.
we are not just going to take an ideological stand without considering India's interests. That was one of the main problems that was happening, where, as our foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar, put it, there was a lot of thinking in Europe that the world's problems are not Europe's problems, but Europe's problems should be the world's problems. It can't happen like that. There has to be a greater understanding of win-win relationships around the globe.
Thank you so much, Jay Panda, for that. We're totally out of time, but thank you for this conversation, both about the politics of Delhi and the larger look at India's place in the world. I think you articulated it pretty well. Thank you so much for this conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.